That's right, I couldn't find the longest, one meeting I had. Wouldn't know one.
That's all right.
As I was looking at it, like, I don't know which one's.
Which is the newer, which is.
Tonight. Do you want to record this?
Should be
recording on you.
Is it recording on YouTube? Okay, then we're fine.
In the grocery store with those produce bags, it is there.
Mhm. They're ready whenever you are. We don't have, we're still missing Carlos.
I know. That's why I'm waiting, because they don't want to start if they're just running late, only a minute or two late.
And I have mine up and they're not up. No, they're not on that. Because I was thinking the same thing.
Okay. One more minute. Here are these. I don't know if you want to mess with them now or wait until.
Do it until you close.
Okay.
Jeff went to the other one, so he's.
Okay, he's ready to go. I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. And at this point, I would ask for a motion to enter into executive session.
Madam Chairman, I move to go into executive session. 6:31 or whatever.
It's 6:33.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of entering into executive session, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? All right, we shall begin our executive session. And Ryan, do you have all the paperwork that we'll need?
I don't have any of anything that we would have.
All right, we'll just wing it.
How's it going, Mark?
How about, how are you?
I'm good.
No, sure.
And they signed, both signed off.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just trying to get out of everybody's way. It's so nice to see you, Karen.
Yes, nice to be here.
Yeah.
Community college with no diploma, no GED, no nothing.
Just walk in and do it.
That's their philosophy. We take you as you are.
Yeah.
And it should be. Oh, I didn't even communicate with our students. Dang it.
See one of them.
I see two of them. All right. 7:01. At this point,
That goes back.
I'd like to call a regular meeting to order. Since there are no members of the public here, I won't give our usual reminder for public forum procedures. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
No, there isn't.
No adjustments to the agenda? Is there a motion? Go ahead, Trustee Mailer.
Do we, I don't see, and I know we went over this agenda, but I don't see anywhere on here where we hear from our student representatives. Are we planning to do that somewhere?
And my impression was that the summer meetings for them were optional. Is that a correct assumption on my part, Trustee Clayton?
Is that good?
Yeah, that was what we'd originally talked about, is that they would attend the summer if they chose to.
Right.
I guess they're G, actually.
Thank you.
But I don't think any communications went out to the student reps asking them for input. Under G, when we have our board meeting, our board member conversations, we'll certainly invite them to chime in, because I see at least two of our student reps are attending. Thank you. All right, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'd ask those who favor adopting the agenda to signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. And any abstentions? That has been passed unanimously. Item C, we have an update on district grading by Superintendent Kramer.
And I'm going to go ahead and pull that up, the document. Trustees would have received that document in an email, and those attending here in person do have a paper copy. If you remember from our work session, this was a similar document that we discussed in that work session. Brian, or is it just a little delayed on there? Is that it's still is it showing on there? Christine or Ryan, can you see that document on your screen? Okay, never mind. It's just a little bit delayed on our screen there. So as you can see, there's the draft of the document. We have gone through a number of different meetings, two separate meetings at the school level, one district-wide meeting, and 3 different collegial meetings. And we've adjusted some minor things. The majority of the document is very similar to what we discussed in the work session. Some of the major changes deal with that first paragraph and the timelines in which we talked about implementation, proficiency scale work, and other common assessments. Really, the basis that we're really working from is that the teachers have the opportunity to utilize what they know to be successful in their classrooms and finding a way within this grading system to make sure that we're providing them that information and utilizing that in the classrooms. So many of the same things will allow us to really be district-wide in many of the practices that have been happening, sometimes at individual schools, from the comparison of the eligibility of having a level 4 work, which is the highest level of work. And in some cases, there was the interpretation that level 4 work was above and beyond grade level, where we are still in the exceeding piece, and 3 being the proficiency. The piece that really exemplifies some of our work for standards are 3 measures for each standard will be included, and that can include formative assessments, common assessments, and semester tests and culminating projects. That will be also another piece in which we're working with students, especially at the high school level, on semester end assessments. And those assessments might look like what would be a semester final for them in some courses. In other courses, it might be more project-based, where there is a project or a culminating project for the end of the semester that will indicate their proficiency for that course. And we'll kind of come into play a little bit at the end when I talk about the formulas, and we will be utilizing the letter grade system and how we will kind of transfer that information. But as we kind of keep working down the student learning piece and where students are assessed and the opportunities for those things, daily classroom activities and practice will not necessarily be part of the indication of attainment of the standard or non-attainment of the standard. It will still have the expectation that students are doing that work, and there will be consequences or motivational factors that the student will be provided with to get that work completed, but that may be separate from actually affecting their academic component on their report card. So for instance, attendance or participation in some courses may lead to, if it's a part of the standard, like in band. Participation is a standard in band. So that actually will enter into their final grade. Whereas in a mathematics class, there is no standard about participation, even though participation is very important, and that is a skill that they will be given feedback on. It does not necessarily affect their academic or standard grade. And so that's a pretty dramatic difference, as sometimes that has had some effect. Also the opportunity too, where the differences where people or students have learned to play the game of school where extra credit is such a big impact. We're wanting as much feedback on basis of academic achievement as opposed to those other factors that are still important and will be a part of a report card and feedback, but won't necessarily affect the student's academic grade. The common assessments, again, we're talking about the 3 to 5 per standard that teachers will have in analyzing the proficiency of students. And then the semester final, again, talks about how this can improve a student's grade and can be part of what we determine their proficiency. We have added a sentence in there that was, as we listen to teachers, students who have achieved a 4 on all standards will have the option to not take the semester final. So if they've demonstrated in that course that they have throughout that semester completed everything at the highest level possible, if they want to not have to take that semester final, they do have that option to not have to take that. So that is hopefully a motivator to work extremely hard during that, but we still want to present that opportunity for students who might take an entire semester to gain proficiency or gain that opportunity to get a 4, still have that opportunity by the end of the semester. Where in some cases, what we've found is that a student being told in early November or maybe even earlier that there's no way they can possibly pass the course, that motivational piece to even attend that course or be participating in that course diminishes drastically. And so that's why it's important to have both of those factors, but give those students the opportunity who have achieved at the highest levels to have the option to not take that assessment or do that project. Now going back to the biggest portion probably that will impact and be seen, there will be the traditional grade as we account for it on the report card from A, B, C, D, and F. How we go to that or get to the traditional grading is through every standards for instance, math. Let's say 8th grade math has 10 standards that they will be working on for the year. They divide that up and there's 5 standards in that first semester. So then they will take an average of those 5 standards to gain a final grade in that course. And then that percentage or that average is what's on the left-hand column on average across multiple standards. So if I have a 3.5 to 4, that will be an A, a 3.0 to 3.49 a B, and then so on down the line, where a 2.0 to 2.49 is a D, and then of course below that an F, and then there is the opportunity for no evidence. There still is, and I should have mentioned this before in homework, there still will be in the grade book notations of students' completion on daily work and homework. So parents do still have the opportunity to see, is my child finishing all their work? And that will be also a component of their eligibility if they're in extracurricular activities. But they won't be assigned a specific grade on that homework. It'll be either completed, incomplete, or missing. And those will, and I think I have that a little bit off because I know the top one is completed, but the other two, there are other 2 components of not turned in or missing. I don't know the exact vocabulary. But so a parent can go on PowerSchool and see, yes, my child has finished all their work. They have completed, they're staying on task, they're doing what they need to do. And then it's also holding them accountable for that work. And it's just not necessarily specifically reflected on that final grade or that academic, because as we know, a lot of pieces with homework and daily work come from those skills that are extremely important, but not necessarily can somewhat skew an academic achievement on some things that we've seen in the past. And then one of the biggest components too is the reassessment agreement. Our vision for this is that it is done cooperatively with the teacher and the student, that there is not just onus on one member, just the student. It's your job to always complete that. We don't have that vision. It just doesn't fall 100% on the student, nor do we think that it falls 100% on the teacher. So it is in cooperation that we feel that this form, which will be district-wide, will be a part of each school's agreement to be able for a student to reassess on a common assessment. And so that's a big component here, where we've had some schools use the reassessment agreement, some have used it for a time, some have moved away from it. This is going to be a district-wide piece that it is very important that all schools within the district follow these criteria. And that's one of the things, as we discussed this, we really wanted to emphasize this is a district-wide grading system, not necessarily only one high school's trying this out, one middle school trying this out. Everybody has the same system, and we have a common language district-wide on how we're achieving those things. So as you can see, it just kind of goes down the options for that. We have a lot of teachers working extremely hard already. I mentioned this in executive session, but I've been so impressed with the teachers in this district over the last 2 weeks who have, I've seen coming into central office or meeting via Zoom to discuss the new grading system that we're putting into place, making sure they're having the highest level of communication with each other and working together, which is phenomenal. I'm so impressed with our teachers and how hard they're working already to make sure this is going to be implemented with the highest level within the district and have a lot of hopeful successes in getting that common language and set expectations across the district. And hopefully then see the fruits of their labor as we progress over the years to come. Now, this does not require action. What we will do is many of these guiding principles do affect different policies. And so those will come before the board next month for their first reading in July and how those will affect those policies and how we work through that. And we will also have a policy committee meeting in the upcoming next 2 weeks to discuss those policies and make sure we have a recommendation moving forward for the board in July. But if anyone would have any questions over that information that I just shared in regards to the draft, I would certainly welcome those.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Go right
Please
ahead.
speak, Sarah.
I know that there was a 65%, 35% common assessment rule. Is that going to carry over, or what's going on with that?
No, there is no longer a 65-35. It will all be completely based on formative assessment and common assessment and culminating project or semester tests.
Okay. And then my second question was, I love that there will be reassessments, but will there be limits to how many reassessment students can take, or will it be something that is infinite? Or...
Yep. There actually, and I can't remember exactly where it is spelled out, but there is a time limit in which the student can take the reassessment, and they are allowed only one. But okay, there we go. Teachers will work with students to complete reassessment agreement where a student scores 0 to 2 on a common assessment. Students scoring a 3 may elect to reassess to improve their score.
Okay, that's all the questions I had. Thank you.
And the other piece there too that is kind of unique with this, Sarah, and I want to make sure and communicate that also. There is the situation in which a student could get 2s on all of those common assessments. And if we were to take an average per se, a student would not necessarily achieve a 3. But in this situation, it is professional judgment that if a student achieves a 3 on the culminating semester final and then has led up to that, they should receive a 3 because they've demonstrated at the culminating activity that they are proficient on that standard. It is not necessarily a percentage basis where you had to do the math in which you were able to determine proficiency. So even I could change that to a student continually gets a 1 on the formative assessment, a 1 on the common assessment, but is able at the semester final to get a 3 or a proficient score. That final score for that student would actually be a 3. And if we did the average work, they would not have achieved a 3 on past utilizing averages. So it's much more based on professional judgment as opposed to teachers indicating or utilization of a mathematical formula to determine a student's score on a standard.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good questions.
So follow up on that, because you pointed out this paragraph about the reassessments, and I think she was asking about limits to those. Is there someplace else, or is there someplace we're going to put in here where we're actually put a number on that?
And it is one time, and I can't remember if it was in there or not, Mark, because I think in the first one we did have, and Donna, if you want
a
to
discussion item,
jump in, if we had that or identified that, I cannot remember where that was at.
My recollection that it was originally discussed at 2 weeks.
But how many reassessments can they take over the same standard?
And it was only one, but I don't know if we had,
I don't believe we put the 2 weeks in there.
It says 10 school days.
okay, there, okay, thank
Does
you.
it?
Yeah,
It does.
I thought so. I thought we still had that.
I'm watching him scroll through this document.
Sorry.
Under common assessment, the second full paragraph.
Common assessment 3 to 5.
But I think Sarah's question is how many times can they retake?
And they would only be allowed the one retake.
And I don't know if we,
10 days following the performance and the common assessment to retake.
so I don't know, we might need to put in a sentence to say retakes are limited to one opportunity or something of that nature.
I am sure that I read that in there somewhere too.
Oh, okay, you're
I
looking
just
for it?
remember Where now that it,
Okay, just so, I guess, I was just trying to follow up on Sarah's
No, you're-
question.
it's-
And
thank you,
if
Mark.
we understand that, yes, there is a limit, maybe it's, you know, if it was, we all understand it was in there somewhere, or it will be, or
Mhm.
whatever. And I do have a couple others, and maybe this gets addressed in other policies, but I just want to bring them up. So we talk about the non-academic factors, not being reported separately. So, and I'm, this, the last sentence too, about the building teams developing tracking for that. I assume then that the building team, or I guess I shouldn't assume, but is there going to be repercussions for if, you know, we have a student that's failing to, you know, be prepared for class on a consistent basis, or is disruptive, or things of that nature? I mean, we deal with some of those things, and I'm sure it's in the, you know, there's a behavioral policy. Are we going to maybe talk about then the repercussions to, you know, doesn't affect the grade necessarily, it gets reported separately. So are we going to address that, I guess?
Well, and one of the biggest factors to this is that there are repercussions or consequences based on the behavior matrix for those different and negative behaviors, but it doesn't follow and affect a student's academic grade. And that's the piece that separates it, because there are some cases where I've seen that behavior has dramatically increased a student's score and led to inaccurate academic feedback for students. And that's the important component
Okay.
on that separation, that there still is those remaining consequences for behaviors. And, you know, whether they be in our traditional consequences that we've had, which is not changing at all, because those still are in existence and still would be in existence for a classroom management plan for a teacher. You know, just as if in most cases that I had a student who was taking the time for me, then it was my opportunity to take some of their time either through detention or other opportunities that I would have them do that, and then provide them with that feedback, either through phone calls to parents or other things that might be necessary, especially if they're participating in activities too, and having conversations with those sponsors too in relation to their behavior and what I'm seeing in the classroom. But really what we were trying to kind of develop here was that separation of not necessarily affecting that final academic grade, that we want to provide the most clear feedback to students on.
And Trustee Jesperson, a remark or a suggestion that Superintendent Kramer came up with earlier this year is that these might be reported out in a category of college readiness criteria.
Okay.
And that might be effectively identifying areas upon which the student needs to work for both the parents and the students. If we reported it in that fashion, if we indicated that these will affect the student's college readiness.
And a lot of times too, in parent-teacher conferences, when I was teaching and had those available, I really emphasized those, because in a lot of cases, that was actually the best feedback that I could provide kids, because I'm a great example. Academically, I was not at the very highest of my class, but work ethic and the ability to get things done, yes, that was a high strength. And I think that kind of shows, it can even demonstrate future success that we know we have to provide those kids with that feedback, because even if you're not at the number 1 or number 2 academically of your class, there's a good chance that you could still have an extremely successful career in many different areas because of the other skills that you possess.
And we've had a lot of community feedback that we want to encourage the development of those, as we've called them, soft skills among our graduates. So pulling those out and identifying them for both the students and the parents are relatively important.
Thank you.
Good questions. Thank you.
I have another question. I'm sorry.
That's why
I
you're
was wondering, this last year, I know teachers had this thing called which was put in the grade book if a student was not proficient on a standard. And I know a lot of my classmates expressed frustration in that they would take in a common assessment and only one of the standards would be like below proficiency, and all of the rest of the standards that they had taken in that common assessment were 4s and 3s. And that that was put into that common assessment would make their grade in that class plummet, and their parents would be appalled with how bad their grade looked. I wondered if the is carrying over as well.
It's a great question, Sarah. And actually in this system, it would not, because as I kind of talked about before, was that possibility for them to have the one that in a percentage that, as you indicated from your classmates indicated, that percentage wise would have a significant effect by just having one of those I's, could drop a score down completely. And that's the greatest example that I can use of where that isn't the best indicator of a student's knowledge in that course. Because when we go back to a common assessment piece, and we can indicate through common assessments that student achieved at a 1, but then all at once they finally got it, they had the light bulb moment, and they get that 3, they actually are having that opportunity rather than basing it on strictly averages and percentages, this being the culminating factor in the fact that if you have that knowledge and it doesn't come till the very end of the semester, that's okay. You still have the opportunity to demonstrate that proficiency at any time throughout the semester. And that's a pretty powerful thing too, because also another situation where we might enter is a student from the very beginning gets it from the start of that unit or that standard, and they get a 4, but they have a life-altering event or a tragedy in their semester, and their focus and their understanding and opportunity on a one-time test, like a semester test, they demonstrate a 1. That teacher has the ability to see and take that knowledge of that student, knowing it from the very beginning and demonstrating it as a 4, to give that final grade on that standard of 4 rather than averaging it. And that's why the power of this in professional judgment for teachers is really, really critical, and an opportunity for students to really demonstrate either from the very beginning of a standard or at the very end. It doesn't matter when you get it, but we're really concerned about that you get it, not necessarily that you created this average of 80% over time and demonstrated an ability to work a percentage, but the ability to demonstrate your learning is paramount in this situation, or this grading criteria.
Mr. Kramer, you mind if I weigh in there?
Please do.
Sarah, I think your question's pointing to having an eye on the grade book up until remediation time for that 2-week period. And a big part of the reason that happened this year was that a common assessment, in what I was able to see this year, a common assessment could be assessing up to 11 standards in a single class. And a teacher had to take those 11 standards and average the scores across them in order to produce a grade for a common assessment. In this system, that averaging won't have to take place. So rather than have a single grade for the common assessment, each one of the standards that was measured is going to have its own score. So where the I was used last year was because if a student was not proficient on one standard, their percentage could possibly still be indicative of fairly high performance in the 80s and 90s. And a student would not be necessarily willing to come in and remediate that score. Whereas when we separate them out and don't assign one score across 11 standards, it'll be apparent that there's one spot that does need to be fixed without the I.
Okay.
Sorry, I missed your hand there, Mr. Christensen. I'll keep a better eye out for that.
Any other comments, questions?
So I do apologize because I did miss the work session on this. So this question is probably been easily addressed, and I can assume, but I don't want to do that. But a final GPA coming out of high school, is it the same scale here on the 0 to 3 that the common assessments are the traditional grades? Does it follow the same?
It will follow a traditional GPA scale.
Okay.
In what we have, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that'll come through and actually be more apparent when we talk about the policies, because that's where we are in the policy. Our recommendation is going to be currently where we have a double multiplier, I guess would be the best indicator for college courses, that actually rather than having a one step and giving an advantage to college, we actually, because Hathaway already does weight college scores higher, we're not going to double weight them as we have in the past, or at least that's going to be the recommendation, is that we cease double weighting college courses and just utilize the Hathaway GPA in most of our indicators.
Okay.
Any further questions, comments, contributions? Thank you, Superintendent Kramer, for all that information. It's nice to finally make some progress on this
Yes.
issue.
It's very
We've been
exciting.
kind of stalling for a few years. Next item on the agenda is item D, staff recognition, and we are acknowledging the retirement of Connie Wilson, our TMS library clerk. Connie has served in that position for many years, very ably. And I don't know if we have any.
I actually tried to, she wasn't home today, deliver her clock today and thank her for things. And that's what I was doing today to many of our retirees. And we just want to thank Connie for her years of service to TMS. She will be greatly missed. And hopefully have the opportunity, as I did try to talk many of our retirees into coming back as substitutes also, and the opportunity that they have within the district. And we, as much as too, we would like to see them in the district. We'd also be welcome to utilizing them in any capacity that we can for our kids, and appreciate Connie's work. And I know this past year was very difficult and things, and we appreciate all the things that she has done for TMS Library.
Mr. Heyman, do you have anything else to add?
Giving her a clock.
Yeah, Connie Wilson's been with us for a long time, has been an outstanding employee. Basically, library clerks are required to function independently as Mrs. Perkins bounced back and forth between the middle school and the high school. She's a great friend to kids. She's a reader, which turned out to be a tremendous advantage because she spent countless hours reading books so she could make strong recommendations to students. Did not require them to wander through the library and hope to find something that they could bond with in terms of something they wanted to read. So Connie was a great advocate, not only for students as individuals, but in terms of, hey, I'm interested in this genre, I'm interested in this author, what series can you recommend? She did a wonderful job with that, which I think is pretty unique in terms of the time she put into a passion that she had for helping students at the middle level explore literature. So I thank her tremendously.
She has been a true asset, hasn't she?
Yes, she has.
Moving on, we have no public attendees this evening, so we have obviously no public forum. Our next item is our consent agenda. Are there any items that you wish to pull? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
We move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Trustee Jesperson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Trustee Saucedo. Is there any discussion about the consent agenda items? Hearing none, I'd ask all who wish to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that has passed unanimously. And we are on to new business. Our first item is to consider offering an annual employment agreement for the 2020-2021 school year to Darby Hoffman as a school nurse at our 2 Torrington elementary schools. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And that was Trustee Jesperson and Trustee Bullington. Is there any discussion on this item? All those who wish to approve of offering this contract, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that has been unanimously approved. Item B, we are considering the approval of our superintendent's salary for the 2020-2021 school year. Is there a motion?
I would increase superintendent
Oh, sorry.
salary to $5,000 over current run rate. In addition, have the district retirement and insurance match the rest of the district employees.
Thank you, Trustee Zach Miller. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Bullington. Is there any discussion? As we discussed in executive session, we dropped Superintendent Kramer into a vat of boiling oil this year, and he has survived admirably, and we salute him for everything he's done. This has truly been a trial by fire, along with every other superintendent in the nation, I recognize, but coming into a new district and having to deal with everything that's come our way is especially challenging. So we commend you on your work this year. Any further discussion? All those wishing to approve of the superintendent's salary for the 2020-2021 school year, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that item is approved unanimously. Item C, we're asked to consider the approval of contracting with Brooke Carson for autism and behavior specialist consultation for the upcoming school year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Jesperson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Wagner. Any discussion? Hearing none, I ask all of you wishing to approve of this contract to signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that item has been approved unanimously. Item D, we are considering approving of contracting with North Platte Physical Therapy for district student physical therapy services. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you, Trustee Saucedo. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Jesperson. Any discussion? All those wishing to approve of this contract, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. And any abstention?
I abstain.
Thank you, Trustee Miller. This motion was approved with 8 aye votes and 1 abstention. Item E, we are considering the approval of contracting with the Institute for Multisensory Education for in-district professional development for the upcoming school year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, trustee Bullington. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, trustee Saucedo. Is there any discussion? All those wishing to approve of this contract, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. And any abstention? This item was unanimously approved. Item F, you are considering the approval of contracting with Solution Tree for in-district professional development services for the upcoming school year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, trustee Wagner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, trustee Jesperson. Is there any discussion?
Can I just get an idea of how that's going to look? You're saying 20 days of in-district services. So can you just paint me a picture of how that's going to lay out during the school year?
Absolutely. I'll actually ask Donna if she could fill us in on that. She's kind of more related to that specifics, but I can answer some of the general pieces maybe, and I can fill in. But Donna, if you want to answer trustee Saucedo's question.
Absolutely. So we've contracted, or we would, pending your approval, contract with Solution Tree, and they will be here 4 days in June to work directly with school psychologists, special education, counselors, Mr. Kramer and myself, to create a district-wide process that has special ed and regular ed really working together, helping teams. The other days that she's in the district is actually working with building, I'll call them leadership teams that could be comprised of special ed teachers, regular ed teachers, some paras, helping buildings really understand how special ed should function at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So each building has already worked with. Kristen is the name of the consultant we've been working with. They've already been working with her on their building plans for special education and how general ed and special ed work together. So like Trail and Lincoln both worked with her on creating schedules for this coming year that would allow interventions to not interfere with core academics for any student that needs it, not just special ed, but any kid that might need it to get their tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 systems. Mr. Heyman, I know, is doing some work with her on some co-teaching, having the special ed teachers and the regular ed teachers working together at tier 1, tier 2, and possibly tier 3, really combining their efforts. And he's even recreated his schedule a little bit so they had common planning time. So those are some of the things that have already happened, and this would be continuing work at the building levels primarily.
Okay, and then the remaining, so you have 4 days in June, and then the remaining days are going to fall throughout the school year, or how does?
Yes, basically she'll be here, I won't say monthly, but often for 3 to 4 days a week, so she can get to every building in that time. So she'll work a short time with half a day with TMS, half a day with Trail, half a day with Lincoln in those times that she's here.
Donna, this last year, how many days was she here?
She came out for 3 trainings, I believe, this year with us so far, or Skype, the last one technically.
Yeah, it was a number of days in which she was divided between the buildings and worked with those staff members individually in small groups based on the building's plan for development around the central district idea of improvement for special education.
Yes, and she works with Solution Tree, obviously, which we've paired with for many years. They have taken their special education gap, and I believe she said originally that they had a 70% gap and they've closed that down to something like 20%. So there's a 20% gap between special ed and regular ed with the process that's used.
And if any of the principals sorry, Trustee Cicito, go ahead. I'll let you go ahead, and I was going to ask the principals to kind of chime in too and how they've utilized her over this past year in their buildings, because I know each one has been unique in that situation. But go ahead,
No, I was just, so basically the teacher is not out of the classroom, essentially. She's working with them while they're actually in the classroom.
That would be up to the principal how they would schedule it. So I know this year, I know that Tyler had pulled his Title I special ed teachers for a half a day to actually work with her during school time. But I think I believe Niana may have had them after school time in some of the times this year. So I think every principal gets to decide how they choose that time to be used.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Heyman would be a good one to chime in here. He's done a ton of work with her already, and she tells me all the emails and phone calls she gets from him.
Yeah, we've worked a lot with her. As we know, the results that we're getting in terms of assessments with students with IEPs in particular is not where we want it to be. So the process we're exploring as a middle school is co-teaching, where a special ed teacher and a regular ed teacher would be in the same classroom at the same time. Previously, the only model we've used is a pullout, and pullout has not worked satisfactorily. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't continue to do some pullout, but having the special ed teacher in with the regular ed teacher will be much more powerful. The biggest piece of that is if a special ed teacher just shows up in class and there has been no co-planning or co-design, it's doomed to failure, because the chances of them becoming more like an EA than a teacher is great without co-planning and co-design. So one of the things that we built into our schedule for next year is time for example, for Brenda Scott, who's our special ed teacher that's working with language arts teachers, to meet with Bryce Hespy, who's a 7th grade language arts teacher, 2 days a week, where they would co-plan and co-design. The neat thing about what we've gotten from Solution Tree from Kristen is she has all kinds of protocols and work forms already in place that we can use to do a better job of sitting and talking about what interventions can we use that are powerful with students. So the real power is pulling in her research base, her protocols, and having our teachers co-design and collaborate so that when they're in the classroom, we have things in place to help special ed teachers do 3 things. One is, how do they better access the content that everybody else accesses? For example, research says that the average student may need 15 to 20 exposures to a concept to really solidify that information or that skill. The students with an IEP that has a processing disorder may need 75 exposures. So how is that student going to access it when they're being expected to access it in exactly the same manner as a regular ed student? The second component would be how to process it. So if something is written at grade level and students are reading 4 years below grade level, how are they going to access and process that successfully? Now, that does not mean that they would not be exposed to grade level material. It's not about dumbing it down so students can access things. It's about scaffolding them up so they can successfully access that. The third part would be, how do they demonstrate what they know? And some students can demonstrate it with a paper, some might do a poster board, some might do a video, but we know that some students have information that may not best be translated in a traditional manner. So the work we're doing with her is very powerful. We know just enough to be dangerous, and really look forward to working with her next year. And in terms of Carlos's question, yes, there would be some time out of the classroom, but we also, for example, would love to have her and will have her sit in when a special ed teacher and a regular ed teacher collaborate and make suggestions about the most productive use of their time. That would not involve teachers being pulled out of the classroom. We also would expect her to visit classrooms where co-teaching is going on and make suggestions there. So 2/3 of the time at least would not involve pulling teachers out of class. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heyman.
Donna, could you also share with the trustees where the funds for this will be from, and from that area, what those funds in that group can be used for?
Many of the funds that she'll come out of Title 6B, so that's the special ed federal funds for us. We may also use, depending on the teacher she works with, Title 2 funds or Title 1 funds, just to make sure that we meet the federal grant requirements, because I mean, if she works more with the general ed teachers, we're not allowed to take that all out of special ed funding, but it is all federally funded. The other point that I think we should make about this is we are under an audit from the state of Wyoming next year for special education and having our ducks in a row. And we're under that audit because of the lack of achievement of our special ed population. And so this work with Solution Tree and Kristen would definitely not only, I mean, it will help our kids, but also it will see to show the state that we have a plan that we've created, that we are working toward to truly improve the academics of these students. The cool thing is it doesn't just help special ed students, it does help all students. So.
Thank you, Donna. And that was just my question, because I know that if trustees are asked, because it is a significant expenditure, that I want them to have that important information. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. Both to Donna and to Mr. Heyman and to Mr. Kramer. Thank you for that explanation.
Any other questions, comments, clarification? We can proceed with our vote then. All those wishing to approve of this contract, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that item passed unanimously. Item G, we are considering the approval of district property insurance renewal, which with school risk retention program for the upcoming school year. Could we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Trustee Jesperson. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Trustee Bullington. Any discussion?
I intercede and just ask.
Absolutely.
Marcy, would you be able to share with the trustees what the previous year's property insurance was in that, and what our percentage increase was for the previous year?
I don't have the previous year's premium, but I do have our increase. We started out in negotiations at a -1%. And as the School Risk Retention Board met, we deemed it necessary to increase our loss fund by an additional $500,000. In doing that, our increase went to a 7% increase from last year to this year. What happens is the prior 5 years loss history is reviewed, and our worst year with that large hailstorm that the county sustained dropped off. So our increase really percentage-wise is quite low compared to some of the other districts.
That's the information I was exactly looking for. Thank you, Marcy. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Any other discussion, questions, concerns?
Marcy, do you know how many schools participate in that group?
Oh.
In an
we-
estimate, I'm sorry to put you on the spot with that.
No, we have approximately 75% of the districts in the state. The other thing to note with this is because of our past history, we are a heavy user of the insurance. So in some ways, our hands are tied in that school risk retention is continuing to insure all districts that are members. But if we were to go out and look at picking up insurance individually from a private carrier, we probably at this point in time would be classified as uninsurable given our past usage.
Thank you, Marcy. That, again, exactly the information I was wanting to make sure trustees were aware of.
At this point, I'd ask those of you wishing to approve of this insurance renewal, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? And that has passed unanimously. Item G, topics for discussion. Could I please call on Representative Fritzler to contribute any comments, observations, material that you have gathered since we last met concerning student issues, concerns, questions? Callie, you're still on mute.
Hi there. It's Lorraine, actually. I don't know why it shows up as Callie.
Oh, so she is not. She's not here this evening, correct?
She's been here. She went to let the dog out. Let me get her for you, and then you can rephrase your question, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, hang on just a sec.
We can go to Sarah first if that works.
There you go. That'll work. Thank
All right.
you.
Sarah, anything you'd like us to be aware of?
I think it's been pretty consistent. There's still been a level of uncertainty, even with knowing when graduation is happening and that this year is over, especially with a few of my classmates who are involved in sports such as track and the summer sports that are going to be starting up soon, such as tennis or cross country. As I said, there's been uncertainty as to whether that will happen. And yeah, we've shared some sorrows over the possibility of it not happening. So yeah.
And I'll kind of touch on a little bit of that for summer workouts here during my superintendent update. So hopefully it'll give you some information, but I feel your pain, Sarah, because I feel the exact same way.
Yes. As well as, I guess there has also been uncertainty about how school will look like next year, which I understand isn't very clear for anyone yet, but
we're all experiencing a great deal of anxiety over that concern, trust me. So tell anybody who brings that up to you that join the crowd. We're all in the same boat. Is Callie available yet?
Yeah, I'm here now.
Okay. Sorry I caught you absent. I was just asking, since you're in attendance this evening, if there are any issues or concerns that you have gathered from your classmates that you'd like us to be aware of?
No, not really. I know a lot of my classmates are really wanting to have our senior year and just be able to go back.
That's my biggest concern. I want to go back to school. But other than that, no.
Okay. Thank you. We all want you back in school too. All right, any issues or topics that regular trustees would like to address, bring up? Well, it's nice that you're all so satisfied. Our next item is item H, future meetings. We need to have a special board meeting on June 30th. Or somewhere in that vicinity. To authorize the payment of final bills, etc.
Would that be a new meeting as in prior years Zoom?
If that would be available for the board members or agreeable, that would be perfectly fine. We're willing to do that also from the central office perspective, if that's most convenient for everyone.
Is noon the time that's most convenient for everyone? On the 30th? All right, we'll set that time as 12 o'clock noon on Tuesday, June 30th, 2020. Thank you for your input. And our next regular board meeting will be July 14th at 7 p.m. And that's our budget hearing as well. And with that, we'll turn to the superintendent's report.
So, update on COVID-19 school closures and online learning. So I learned today that we are required to fill out a variance for all of our activities and things. We do have a plan in place that activities directors, administrators, and our other coaches have been involved in. Not all coaches, but some have had some input and opportunity to present their ideas and what we're going to look forward to. So once that variance is completed and accepted, we'll be able to give the green light to all of our coaches and such, and our weight rooms to open in a capacity to service students. So that'll be hopefully happening very soon. As I know, we have a lot of people that are asking to get kids going and have those activities start taking place. Along with that, we will also be completing a variance for an update to our student access to the building. Currently, our practice has been utilizing our personal protective equipment, from gloves, face protection, masks when it's under or when it's even more than 6 feet. Our current variance will be asking to not have to wear the face mask when it is more than 6 feet away from, and we will be moving away from temperature taking due to somewhat the inaccuracy in some cases because of the weather outside and kids coming in and being extremely warm. That actually a better indicator for us is questions indicating their health and if they've been exposed to anyone in the home or had any travel situations where they could possibly have been exposed to COVID-19. This would also include the number of students that we have within the building. Currently, we have only 25 people in our buildings total, as opposed to any rooms. Right now, that variance would ask to have up to 25 people in certain rooms. We would still maintain social distancing of 6 feet or more, and that would dictate how many people would be allowed in a room based on that 6 foot distance. And so those are the variances that we'll be asking for and hopefully be approved. And then that will give us some tendency to be a little bit more normal within our summer school activities. It will possibly create some more difficulties based on the start and end times, because we cannot have more than 25 students enter at a single time, because they would be more than 25 in a certain area. And so we might have to have a staggered start for math students coming in at, let's say, 8 o'clock, and then English students coming in at 8:15 to make sure that we don't have or are not breaking that social distancing or that limit of people within one room. Also, we have our graduation ceremonies coming up on Saturday. THS at 8 o'clock. We have trustee Clayton, trustee Miller, and also trustee Miller at THS. And we have at Lingle, Fort Laramie, trustee Jesperson, trustee Wagner, and trustee Saucedo. And at Southeast, we have trustee Patrick, trustee McClellan, and trustee, Carrie. And so that's what we'll have we have some great opportunities, and I think it'll be a unique experience for our graduates. And I think I'm actually very excited for it because we have the opportunity to celebrate in some traditional ways, but by having it outdoors and hearing some of the ideas that the principals have shared for some kind of uniqueness to it, I think it's going to be a really exciting opportunity for us to see what we can kind of become creative at, and also keep some of our traditions alive in the way we celebrate our graduates. So I'm really excited about that opportunity, and appreciates the parents' understandings that they've had on this situation, also our seniors, because they've been probably impacted the most out of any class that we can probably go back to for quite some time in this situation. And I'm really excited to celebrate the opportunities that we have for them. Some updates also to kind of go back to that, the COVID-19 and the relationship to what that will have economically for us, and some investigations that were kind of ongoing regarding some of our library positions. Because of resignation of Mrs. Smith and the unfortunate passing of Mrs. Quinones at Southeast with our certified librarians, we are currently investigating having only Mrs. Perkins as our one certified librarian. This is really, quite frankly, a cost-saving measure for the district. And looking at those type of things that we can kind of investigate, to not necessarily say this is how we're going to do it for all time, but investigating an opportunity if this is going to work for us. I think there may be an opportunity in the future where ideally we look at a elementary district-wide librarian and a secondary librarian. But due to the very unique circumstances we find ourselves and the warning the governor has issued to many state agencies in regards to the expectations of funding, we do have to investigate and look under every possibility that we can of financial savings. And this is something that we're going to investigate as a district and see what we can do and see how this affects our programming and what we can do to be the most successful district we can. But under these financial uncertainties, really take into effect of every decision that we make for staff or ways we have done things in the past. We must question those going forward to make sure we have the best possible programs that we can for students to try to impact them the least. And this is unfortunately one of those that we may see shortly down the line that we're not comfortable in this decision and we can make a change. Or this is something that we'll see, yes, this is one area in which this was an opportunity that presented itself in unfortunate circumstances, but we're going to investigate it with everything we have. Then number 3, the annual update on the student drug testing. As you can see, it is a little bit different than what we've had in the past due to partial year. And so the data can be kind of considered skewed a little bit, but it does demonstrate kind of where we were at in relationship to the number of students tested. And I think we've seen some things that we're continually investigating and kind of modifying as we progress, and we're going to investigate some more is this the best way that we're doing it, and are there other avenues that we see in addition to the drug testing that we need to explore from nicotine and tobacco and the opportunities that we have there. Also, I know a number of schools in Nebraska have gone to hair follicle testing also, which kind of eliminates some of the other things that comes from the urinalysis. And so we'll still be looking at those. I think that there are some advantages to the program, but it's always important as we take a look at it is it accomplishing our goal of twofold for coaches and all of our activities and those associated with it, demonstrating that we have students that are not utilizing illicit drugs. And the other piece in that is how do we offer, and I think something that we can get much better at, how are we including students who've made choices that may be detrimental to them, but also the impact that extracurricular activities, and then we know the impact that that has on students. How can we get those students that maybe have made a bad decision still being a part of the program and even better than what we've been in the past? Because I think we can see through some of our past experiences, those who've made one poor choice are still involved in programs. Those who've had multiple discretions tend to leave that support system. And how can we become better at supporting them in a way that is going to keep them with a program rather than what we've seen in the past, those with multiple. Yeah, technology error there. We got to hear what, it's always interesting to hear your voice twice. So, but I'll entertain any questions on any of those items if anyone would need some further elaboration.
I don't have anything on those, but I do have a question. This is Carlos. And I know if it's not doable, it's totally understandable because of the fact that things have probably already been set. But I was not sure whether or not I was going to actually be here this weekend for graduation. And Mr. Kramer, I appreciate your text to me asking, to. But I guess in looking at this, would it throw everything off if I was to actually ask to have a seat at all three? I think, this year is pretty special for the seniors. And I guess, at any time, this is one that I would actually, I'd like to be able to be out three so that, I just want to show my support towards the seniors in all the schools, especially this year.
And I think any other year it would have worked, and I would have actually definitely said that would be fine. Unfortunately, when we submitted to our plan only called for 3 specifically board members to attend each event, as it was very specific on the number of people that we were allowed to have at each event. But I think that unfortunately, I would not be able to say yes, because I think that would change our plan and risk what we've already put in place. But I appreciate the request.
Sure, that's totally understandable, and thank you for that. The other thing is, can you give me just a little summary on how summer school is going to look?
What I envision actually summer school, if we are granted the variance, is to look very similar to what we've kind of had in the past, being that as Mr. Plendel and Mrs. Sims have started planning, they've kind of, when we're sitting at that, if they're allowing us 50, which would be 50 per building, the normalcy piece kind of enters in because we've already been basing it on small groups in the past. The only thing that I could see as a dramatic difference may be the start times due to the 25 limit in a entry area or common area as students are entering a building. But for the most part, I do envision many of the same practices that we've had in the past present for services for students in July, where it might be the only difference again is the timing of the year. As we progressed, I know this June we have offered a lot more individual extended school year opportunities, and I know specifically the high schools have been working individually with students who received incompletes on their report cards and having them individually work and come in. And we've had a great deal of success at the buildings getting high school students in and working individually with teachers for set times to recover some of the work that they did not take part in the spring. And so I think that and I think we'll see some, even going forward, some opportunities that I think we will kind of work with to see if that might be an advantage to having in future years also.
Mr. Kramer, may I chime in just for a moment?
Please do.
I met with Mr. Plendel and Ms. Sims today because there are a few differences. Currently, right now for the elementary, normally we have about a staff of 9 teachers, and right now we've only received applications enough for 5.5. So what would have to be different than in the past is they would have to be in roughly 2.5 or 3-hour segments that we would bring kids in. So those teachers would be there all day, and we'd bring kids in roughly from 8 to 10:30, 11 to whatever the next time frames were. And we would do something similar for middle school, high school, just to bring them in sections so we can keep the 50, so we can make sure to meet the rule of 50, but we're also worried about the cleanliness of the building in that time. So instead, Mr. Kramer, you probably didn't know this, we basically did K-8 in the mornings, and then 9-12 went half a day or all day depending on the student. So that'll be the little bit of difference.
Thank you, Donna.
So then, will the CDC requirements as far as like temperatures, face masks, all that, we will be following those during summer school?
There will be, when social distancing cannot be maintained, and a lot of times in elementary classrooms, that will be very difficult. There will be the expectation of face masks. If we're able to maintain social distancing beyond 6 feet as part of our variance request, that will be something that we are requesting and may be granted. The other difference too is rather than taking the temperatures, which we've been doing, and had some challenges, some successes with, because sometimes that indicator, especially for elementary kids, if they were out playing or playing in the yard before they got on the bus, or they were outside, the accuracy of the temperature. So what we're working with is a form for parents, almost as an admission slip, that they are filling out for the child, indicating have they had a cough within the last 24 hours, have they been exposed to any other possible people within the home that could possibly elicit some of the same symptoms for COVID, that may be more accurate than just a singular temperature or those things in conjunction with that. And so we're going to keep record of that as they sign in. The logs will still be maintained, so we have those records of who are in the building and who in this unfortunate situation where somebody may become a positive case of COVID, that we have the tracking ability to identify who could have been exposed within a building also.
We also met today, Mr. Kramer, I asked Mr. Plendel and Ms. Sims to present their actual plans and safety guides that they currently plan on following. We know they may change based on how things roll, so that we can present them to the public health to get their approval. So those, you should have those Friday.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Is there any other business to come before the board? Hearing none, I will declare us adjourned at 8:17. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.